Shalom and greetings from Jerusalem. My name is Joan Lippis, or hashtag Joni in Jerusalem. And I'm here to tackle a question that has really begun to bother a lot of Christians. Can the church, can Christians celebrate the feasts of the Lord? Well, let me begin by telling you what happens when I start to have a spiritual conversation with a Jewish friend. I'm usually asked two questions after a while. The first question is, are you Jewish or Christian? And I answer, yes. Then the next question is, well, then what holidays do you celebrate? Christmas or Passover? And I answer, all of them. So our conversation became a little bit more confusing. You see, I was quoting the prophets, the Hebrew prophets, Jeremiah and Isaiah and Zechariah and Ezekiel. Clearly the Jewish Bible, the Old Testament, the Tanakh, but I was talking about Jesus. Talking about him in a Jewish framework. Yet some of the things I was saying sounded so, well, Christian. I just didn't fit into the mold of being Jewish or being Christian. Now here, a definition is really important because what we hear are based on our perceptions. Everything we hear is processed through our personal grids and perceptions. And that's why communication sometimes is so difficult. We think we're being clear, but the hearer is hearing something completely different than what we think we're saying. We think we're being clear, but we're not. Our perceptions, whether they're true or they're not, are made through our culture, our religious biases, our experience, and our theology. So what is the perception of my Jewish hearer? And this is going to be shocking to most of you. The perception of most Jewish people is that Christian and Gentile are synonymous. Let that sink in. Christian is synonymous with Gentile. So, if a Gentile equals Christian, then Billy Graham, the Pope, and Hitler, all Gentiles, are all Christian. Do you see now why there's confusion and why those questions? So, not receiving a precise answer to the first question, was I Jewish or Christian? The second question was asked to prove it. Well, did I celebrate Passover or Christmas? And so my answer that I celebrate all of them was even more confusing to the hearer. Again, friends, my answers kept me out of the box, the mold my Jewish friend was trying to put me into. In his perception, holidays were either Jewish or Christian. The fact is that Jesus was a Jew, celebrated all the feasts, and that was irrelevant to my friend. And there are several holidays that even emphasize the confusion. Christmas versus Hanukkah. Jews don't celebrate Christmas, and Christians don't celebrate Hanukkah, although Jesus did. And what about Passover versus Easter? Oh, I hate that word. Let's say Passover versus resurrection. Jews certainly don't celebrate the resurrection, which is on a Jewish holiday, and Christians rarely celebrate Passover. Again, although Jesus did. Interestingly, more and more Gentile Christians are conducting Passover services, but they don't make it an annual celebration, although Jews do. And some Christians, Gentile Christians, recognize Hanukkah, but they focus on that legend about oil rather than the historical truth and significance. So what about Jewish followers of Jesus? Well, that's an issue strongly being debated to this very day. When I was a new believer, follower of Yeshua, I was confronted by this issue. By my Gentile pastor and by my Jewish pastor. Most of you have heard my story about that first year when I was a new believer and the fall feast, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur were coming, and I said to my Gentile pastor, well, what do we do? And he said, nothing. Jesus did it all. I said, that's right. All my life I sat in the synagogue confessing my sins that I had done, or the sins that maybe I had done, and the sins that I might do, and I never knew if I was forgiven. Now that I know I'm forgiven, I want to celebrate. He went, okay, we'll celebrate. And I do celebrate all the feasts. But then there was the time when I had finally come to Israel, and I said to my Jewish pastor, okay, so what do we do for the resurrection? He said, Joni, we don't do resurrection. We do Passover. Like there's a... And what about Christmas? Well, as a child, my family loved Christmas. Our celebration had nothing to do with Jesus. It was just a time the family got together. But, oh, we loved to celebrate it. Yeah, we even had a tree. But every year, Daddy would walk around the house because the rabbi lived across the street, and he had to make sure that the rabbi wouldn't see the tree. Of course, the rabbi knew we had a tree. And we loved hanging the ornaments. Of course, the first one was the Star of David, so we could call the tree a Hanukkah bush. And yes, we celebrated Hanukkah too. We had the best of both worlds. Well, eventually, we did stop doing Christmas because it was the year my brother was bar mitzvahed, and we were all convicted that since as we were Jews, we shouldn't be associated with anything Christian. But when I became a follower of Christ, I was so eager to celebrate his birth. I could finally celebrate Christmas. I could finally celebrate Jesus. And my favorite song then and now was really a prayer of intercession. Oh, come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, who mourns in lonely exile here until the Son of God appear. Oh, but then the chorus, rejoice, rejoice. Emmanuel has come to thee, O Israel. That first Christmas was not quite what I had imagined or hoped for. But then I realized that traditions need not divide us when Christ is preeminent and he's what who we're celebrating. Because we can really learn from so much from each other when we keep him preeminent. Friends, what's important about our worship and our celebration is that we do so in spirit, truth, humility, and love. Let me say that again. Truth, the spirit, humility, and love. So then I started looking forward to celebrating the next holidays with my Gentile brethren, Purim and Passover. To my shock and sadness, they weren't interested. Actually, the Gentile pastor was surprised that I even wanted to. The one new man didn't celebrate Jesus through the holidays. Why not? The one new man, the church, the one new man for whom Jesus prayed and died for, the one new man of Jews and Gentiles redeemed by God's grace through faith in the atoning work of Jesus. But they didn't celebrate him. Was it because, and I'm sure it was, that they called those feasts the Jewish feasts instead of the feasts of the Lord? As time went on, I discovered the terrible breach in the foundation of the church that was designed to be built on the Hebrew prophets and the Jewish apostles. And nothing made that breach more obvious than the holidays we celebrated. Jewish believers had their holidays and the Gentile believers had theirs. But the holidays had more of a divisive impact than just the body. Celebrating the feast caused division in families and confusion in the hearts of believers themselves. I received this letter from a woman, LG. She said, "It just seems that things have been really hard and confusing ever since we started to try to learn more about celebrating the biblical Sabbath. My older kids, girls 12 and 15, have especially been confused. And some of our new friends make it seem like even saying the word Christmas, yet alone celebrating it, isn't the unpardonable sin. Those friends have gone as far to say that they think that those who are not following Torah may not even make it to heaven. My thought then is, why did Jesus have to come and die for us? I love God and I want to do what He wants me to do. I also want to teach my children the right way to live. I also have 2 boys, ages 7 and 9. Obviously, I'm still confused about a lot. Like I said, I want to follow God and do what He wants, but at times things feel so legalistic and rigid. Signed, LG. If that makes my heart break, how does it make God feel? And then there's my very precious and cherished friend, Mary. Mary is the daughter of a pastor, so she spent her entire life in church, a Gentile church. Yet she so loved the celebrations when I would host Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles. And she even bought my feast book celebrating Jesus, the Christian perspective of the Feast of the Lord. She bought it as soon as it was published. But then several years ago, she started attending a Messianic congregation with the intention and the purpose of learning enough to share with my pastor. 2 years to learn enough? What was to learn that was taking so long, especially when she had my book? I later discovered the problem was that she was told that she had to pray certain prayers and follow those Jewish traditions outlined by the Messianic rabbi. Now note my change of vocabulary. Rabbi, not pastor, congregation, not church. But as we talked, she threw off the shackles and simply celebrated Jesus. You see, celebrating is about who, not how. So friends, celebrating the feast of the Lord need not to exasperate the breach. In fact, I contend that nothing can repair that breach and unite that one new man more than celebrating Jesus through the feast of the Lord. So let's start from the beginning. What does the Bible say about the feasts? As I said before, we err when we refer to the biblical holidays as Jewish feasts, and yet because God calls them His feasts, the feasts of the kingdom. But you said God gave them to Israel, the Jewish people. Yes, He did, because of the call on Israel. God said, "You are my witnesses that a people yet unborn will know me." Isaiah 43:10. And who was the people yet unborn? The Gentiles. The psalmist said, He established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which He commanded our fathers, that they should make them known to their children, that the children to come might know them, the children who would be born, that they may arise and declare them to their children, that they may set their hope in God and not forget the works of God. You see, to know Him. God designed the feasts and the celebrations to remember His mighty acts of deliverance, to reveal His character, to recognize Jesus, to reflect on the significance of each of the feasts in our lives, and to rejoice. Well, you've got the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Here are the 5 R's. Remember, reveal, recognize, reflect, and rejoice. Today, there's a lot of attention on the restoration of all things necessary before Christ returns. Well, while I question the application of that verse today, I muse if part of that restoration might be restoring the feast of the church. Maybe? So to answer the question, can, not should, can Gentiles celebrate God's feasts? I ask another question. Is there a valid reason why not to? Is there a page in our Bible that does not in some way point to Jesus? And of course, every feast mentioned was fulfilled by His life and His ministry. His birth, his early ministry, his death, burial, and resurrection, his current ministry, and his future ministry. So I say, yes, church, yes, celebrate the feast of the Lord. Go ahead. So what happened? Why did the Gentiles who were worshiping the Jewish Messiah stop celebrating him through the feasts of the Lord? And why have Jewish believers not put the new wine into new wineskins? And so many of them try to Judaize the church. But the larger question we need to ask is, what now? Can we worship our Savior and enjoy each other's traditions, learning and embracing each other? Sure we can, if we just keep Christ preeminent. Who we're celebrating, not how we're celebrating. So, in part 2, we'll take a quick look back at the sad history of the breach. Then we'll look up to learn about the feasts, and then we can look forward to celebrating Yeshua as the one new man. Won't you please visit our website, www.novea.org, where you can find information on our prayer journey through Israel, where we go through the biblical, the historical sites, and then some very interesting sites where we can pray to break through the strongholds over the land and over the people because of this terrible breach. And of course, we spend a lot of time actually interacting with Israelis, which is always such a treat. And of course, go to my bookstore where you can find my books, the feast books, Celebrate Jesus, the biblical perspective of the feast of the Lord. Got tongue-tied there for a minute. One of my favorite books is God Finished with Israel? Certainly not, which walks through Romans 9 through 11. And my favorite, at this point at least, it's more of a devotional. It's a fun devotional. Who are you, Moses asks God. And of course, don't forget Lunchtime Prayer for Israel. You can get a link right on the novea.org, right over to Lunchtime Prayer for Israel. And of course, there are all sorts of articles and video archives, because from the website you can subscribe either to Lunchtime Prayer for Israel or my YouTube channel, which you're watching right now. And then, of course, don't forget that you can contact me. I love to visit churches and home groups and homes to do seminars on repairing the breach or the Feast of the Lord, or even facilitate a Seder right there. Now remember, everything is focused on the one new man, where there is neither Jew nor Gentile, but both, with distinctions, without division. The one new man, with distinctions, without division. And with that, I say, Lehitraot, Shalom from Jerusalem.